Once Upon a Time, Gabriel Okara, Part 1. Gabriel Okara, Introduction. Just as black writers in the United States and the Caribbean have faced the problem of how to express themselves in the language of those who enslaved them, black African writers have experimented with different ways of communicating in European languages, the experience of colonization, and the feel of their traditional cultures. Among the most famous West African writers working in the English language is Gabriel Okara, considered one of the founders of modern African literature. So, black writers face the problem of how to express the experience of blacks in the language of those who enslaved them. Black African writers experimented with different ways of communicating in English language or European language, the experience of colonization, as well as their feel of traditional cultures. So, Gabriel Okara is one of the most famous West African writer working in the English language, and Okara is considered as one of the founders of modern African literature. About the poet Gabriel Imamotimi Okara, 1921, is a Nigerian poet and novelist who was born in Beaumonde in Yenagoa, Bayelsa State, Nigeria. The first modernist poet of Anglophone Africa. The Voice 1964 is his best known experimental novel and his award winning poetry published in The Fisherman's Invocation 1978 and The Dreamer His Vision in 2005. Okara incorporated African thought, religion, folklore, and imagery into both his verse and prose. He has been called the Nigerian negritudeist. Okara has published two collections of children's poetry, Little Snake and Little Frog, 1992, and An Adventure to Juju Island, 1992. So, Gabriel Okara was born in 1921. He is a Nigerian poet and novelist. He was born in Nigeria. He is the first modernist poet of Anglophone Africa. His best known works are Gabriel Okara is best known for his experimental novel The Voice 1960, which was published in 1964, and his award-winning poem The Fisherman's Invocation, which is published in 1978. And Okara employed or incorporated African thoughts, religion, folklore, and imagery to his poems and essays. Gabriel Okara has been called Nigerian negritudeist. Gabriel Okara has also published two collections of children's poetry, that is Little Snake and Little Frog, which was published in 1992, and An Adventure to Juju Island, 1992. Gabriel Okara can be considered as highly original and uninfluenced by other poets. He has been extremely successful in capturing the moods, sights, and sounds of Africa. His poems show great sensitivity, perceptive judgments, and a tremendous energy. Okara also shows a concern on the topic of what happens when the ancient culture of Africa is faced with modern Western culture. He is one of the founders of modern Nigerian and African literature. He served as a link between colonial poetry and the vigorous modernist writing that began to appear in Nigeria around the time of national independence in 1960. So the poet Okara can be considered as highly original and has never influenced by any other poets. So the poet was extremely successful in capturing the moods, sights, and sounds of the native country, Africa. His poems also show great sensitivity, perceptive judgments, and a tremendous energy that we can see in his poetry. Gabriel Okara also shows a concern on the topic of what happens when the ancient culture of Africa is faced with modern Western culture. So, he is showing a serious concern on what happens to his ancient culture of Africa by getting in contact with this modern Western culture. What happened to the culture of Africa by faced by the modern Western culture. He is one of the founders of modern Nigerian African literature. He served as a link between colonial poetry and vigorous modernist writing. So he is the founder of modern Nigerian and African literature. He also served as a link between colonial poetry and vigorous modernist writing. So Gabriel Okara is one of the writer among the vigorous modernist writers. So this vigorous modernist writing was began to appear in about in the year of 1960, around the time of national independence. So we can understand that he was a link, or Gabriel Okara was a link between colonial poetry and the vigorous modernist writing, which began with Nigeria's independence in 1960. Okara is an original poet and he is largely uninfluenced by the other poets. He has been very successful in capturing mood, sights, and sounds of Africa. His poems show great understanding, sensitivity, great energy, and his poems shows his concern. Poem shows his concern over the possible changes that would happen when the ancient African culture comes into contact with the modern Western culture. The poem Once Upon a Time, written by Gabriel Okara, illustrates the changes a father has seen in him throughout his life, which have been influenced by the way society has changed. In this poem, Okara laments the lost innocence of youth. In it, he condemns the hypocrisy of adults, hemmed in and constrained by rules and conventions, adopting masks for different occasions, for lying, for cheating, and betraying. Whereas childhood is portrayed as a time of honest laughter and spontaneity. So, in the poem, we can understand that he compares adulthood and childhood. Hmm? So, childhood is portrayed as a time of innocence, and adulthood is portrayed as a time of hypocrisy, isn't it? So, the poem Once Upon a Time illustrates the changes a father has seen in his son throughout his life, and he is influenced by the changes happening in the society. So, the adulthood or the youth or the man, not a child, the man is influenced by the changes happening in the society. So, societies tend to change according to the time, isn't it? According to the time or age, the society is has a tendency to change, or there will be cultural change that happens in the society. So the father has seen in his son throughout his so the poem illustrates the changes the father has seen in his son throughout his life, and he is influenced by the changes happening in the society. Gabriel Okara laments the lost innocence of youth. He condemns this hypocrisy of adults who adapt masks for different occasions. The adults are constrained by rules and conventions, and they are often required to lie, threat, cheat, and betray. But childhood is the time of honest laughter and spontaneity. The poet remembers the time when people were sincere and caring in their dealings with one another. He is not happy with the present time. People have changed a lot. People have lost their innocence and openness. He sees such things only in his young son. The poet wants to regain that innocence. So the poem shows the changes happening in the society. Changes happening in one's life due to the change in the society. So and also the poet laments on the lost innocence of youth, because youth is tend to pretend according to the different occasions, or adults adapt mask for different occasions, such as uh, lying in a situation, cheating, betraying, isn't it? So the people or the adults adapt mask for different occasions. The people are constrained by rules and conventions in society, and the youths are often required to lie, cheat, and betray. But at the same time, childhood is the time of honest laughter and spontaneity. The poem Once Upon a Time is a free verse poem that focuses on a father's attitude to cultural change and times past, before the incoming Western culture affected the native African way of life. In the poem, the man, presumably a father, addresses the son, telling him in a rather nostalgic manner how things used to be. People were different back then, more genuine it seemed, and that is what the speaker would like to do now, to return to a restored world. If he can only learn from the youngster. So this is a free verse poem, that is I have mentioned before that free verse poem there will be no particular meter patterns in the poem. There will be no rhymes in the poem. So that is this poem is a free verse poem. The poem focuses on a father's attitude to culture change and times past. Father's attitude to the culture change and the times past and present, before the incoming Western culture affected native African way of life. So how Western culture affected African way of life, that is the poet discussing in the poem. So in the poem, a father addresses his son, telling him in a nostalgic manner how things used to be in the past. So the father described to the son how things used to be in the past or in the old days. People were different back then, more genuine it seemed, and that is what the speaker would like to do now. Return to his restored world, if he can only learn from the youngster. So the poet remembers the time when people were sincere and caring in their dealings with one another. So back or in the old days, people were so much caring and sincere. They were careful or caring in the dealings of one another. So the poet is not happy with the present time. People have changed a lot. So there is cultural gap between past and present time. People have lost their innocence and openness. So there is no frankness between people now. There is no openness. They lost their innocence. He sees such things only in his young son. So the poet can only see the innocence in the young son. The poet wants to regain that innocence. Back then, people were not after your money. They could look you in the eye and smile real smiles. But nowadays, although the smiling teeth are on show and they will shake your hand, all they want to know is your financial status. And so the poem progresses, the early stanzas revealing more of the negative changes that have occurred during the father's lifetime. He's old enough to have watched decent human standards drop to the wayside as Western ideals, together with capitalism, gradually took over. The speaker wants to relearn from the as yet untainted son how to love and be genuine again. It's rather a pathetic plea coming from the adult to the youngster. So he is in a nostalgic manner. The poet is remembering back in the past, people were not after your money. That people were not searching your pockets or they were not looking for your money. Nowadays, people are uh, mm, just considering other people, or just they will mind people only, the people who have a lot of money, or rich people will mind the people who have a lot of money. In the past, the people tend to look you in the eye and smile real smiles. So in the past days, people were smiling or laughing heartily, not pretending. In the past days, they were uh, looking in the eye. So if someone is looking into your eye and smiling, that will be the smile of innocence. But nowadays, the people smiles are just a show off. That is, when they smile, we can see their they just show their teeth. They are just pretending that they are laughing, but inside they are not really laughing. They are just pretending that by showing their teeth. They will shake your hand, but they want to know your financial status by checking your pockets. So nowadays, people will shake your hand by uh, uh, checking your other pocket with the other hand. They want to know your financial status only by shaking your hand. And as the poem progresses, the first stanzas show only negative changes that happened or occurred during father's lifetime. So now he is old enough to have watched decent human standards drop to the wayside as Western ideals together with capitalism gradually together. So this capitalism took over the present age. So what happened to the society due to capitalism in the society? So what happened to the culture? So, due to the Western culture or capitalism, what happened to the society? That is the poet trying to convey in the poem. The speaker wants to relearn from the as yet untainted son how to love and be genuine again. So the the speaker want to learn how to love and be genuine again from his son. The speaker want to learn from his son how to love and how to be genuine again. The poet want to be genuine, and he wants to love. The poet wants to be genuine and he wants to love really, not in a pretending manner. So the speaker or the poet wants to learn it from his son, because the child has only that innocence. The adulthood has lost that innocence. That's why it's rather a pathetic plea. It's a pleading from the speaker. It's a pathetic pleading coming from the adult to youngster. The speaker reminisces about a time when people were sincere and caring in their dealings with one another. He speaks regretfully about the present time when people are not like before. He seems to feel that people have lost innocence and openness, which he now sees in his young son. He wants to regain that innocence. So here the poet Gabriel Okara speaks about the cultural changes that have come to Africa because of the influence of Western culture. So the poet is speaking about the cultural change happened to African people or African society because of the influence of Western culture. He laments or regrets the loss of traditional African culture. The poet laments on the loss of African culture. The poet explains what happens when the traditional African culture faces the Western ways of life. So the poet is explaining in this poem what happens when the Western ways of life face the or influence the traditional African culture. And he is now regretting that people have lost that innocence and openness, and the people are not like that of before. So the poet is laments or regretfully speaks about the present time. The speaker really wants to laugh and wants to be genuine again. Gabriel Okara speaks about Africa's culture changes with the coming of Western cultures. So, with the coming of Western cultures, a lot of changes happened in Africa's culture. Gabriel Okara speaks about it. The poet uses this poem to convey his feelings about the loss of traditional African culture against Western influences. So the poet is trying to convey to his readers, to the readers, that his feelings or his concern over the loss of traditional African culture due to the influence of Western culture. Gabriel Okara explains what happens when a traditional African culture meets the forces of Western ways of life. Themes of the poem include how society changes, cultural shift, capitalism, values. So themes of poem, that means society changes, that is the changes happened in the society due to Western culture. Cultural shift, that is cultural gap between present and past. Capitalism, that is the gap between rich and poor. Values, that is truthhood or innocence, and falsehood or hypocrisy. Perhaps the tune is ironic. The tune of the poem is ironic. Perhaps the speaker knows deep inside that he will never regain that purity. He won't be able to turn back time and relive life as a transformed person. The poem is about happier times gone past and hopes for a happy ending, for which the writer longs for, as in a fairy tale, and therefore the use of once upon a time is the title of this poem. The speaker's wishes are a fantasy. So the tune of the poem is ironic, or just opposite to what the poet wants to get back or to regain. The speaker knows well that he will never regain that purity or innocence. He can never regain. That the speaker won't be able to turn back time and relive life as a transformed person. So, this poem, Once Upon a Time, is about happier times gone past and hopes for a happy ending, for which the writer is longing. As in a fairy tale, the writer or the poet used the title of the poem Once Upon a Time as the title of as in fairy tale. You can see it. So the speaker's wishes are fantasy, we can say, because the speaker knows well that he will never regain that purity, that we won't be able to turn back time.